Welcome to the Performance Mirage, the show about the gap between what your dashboards say and what your business is actually experiencing. I'm Ryan Levander, founder of Optimize. We work with e-commerce and lead gen companies running Meta and Google ads to replace broken measurement and attribution theater with a simple optimization system tied to real revenue, not platform ROAS. Every episode, I bring in someone doing the actual work to dig into a real story, what looked good on the surface, what was actually happening underneath, and what it took to fix it. In episode 1, we have Scott Reid on, founder and CEO of Ecommerce Optimizers, and someone I partnered with directly on client work. Scott brings in a no BS, show me the business numbers mindset that this show is really built around, and there's no better person to kick off episode 1 with. I've gotten the opportunity and pleasure of working with Scott for many years. So welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, it's been a long time. As you were saying that, I was thinking, it's going back to 2019, I think. So we're approaching 7 years. It's a long time.
Pre-COVID times, that's a whole different universe.
That's right. That's right.
I don't think I've been saying I should do a podcast since then, but it hasn't been far off. So I'm glad I'm finally kicking off the podcast.
I know. Tell me about it.
Have you on here as well too. So really looking forward to this, and maybe going back to how we know each other. It wasn't quite 2019. Well, actually, it was further back than 2019 that we got connected through measurement marketing and Chris Mercer, I believe. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you joined, maybe let's go back to that time for just a brief minute here to let people get to know more about you and what you were looking to kind of achieve at that point in your career, and kind of you were always deep in the analytics, but the shift to kind of more of a focus on that approach.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where the more that I worked in digital marketing, the more I realized that there was a lot of money to be made in terms of understanding the numbers behind the activity. And
Right.
I remember first listening to Mercer, and he really resonated with me. I mean, we both know he's a great guy, and he just has such a great way of teaching and instructing and all that. And it just resonated with me, was that was the unlock that I could, if I elevated my game in that area, because I kind of knew what I was doing, but I didn't know it to the level that I certainly do now. And I saw that as a way to differentiate myself. And you did as well, I'm sure, because we were both in there. I think you had started maybe 6 to 12 months before I did.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it really kind of changed the game for me, because it allowed me to assess the effectiveness of a company's marketing strategy through, a really advanced way of measuring the performance of marketing. And I guess the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. One of the quotes, Mercer is so quotable, as we've said in the past as well. One of his quotes that stands out to me still is the kind of how he flipped the whole. Usually people call it marketing measurement, kind of like the thing you're doing in the department. He did the whole measurement marketing, and I had some people say to me like, "Isn't that the opposite?" I'm like, "Well, he did that on purpose to like stand out." And he's like, "Measurement's how we listen, marketing's how we respond." And most people do random acts of marketing first, and then figure out what worked and what. It's kind of the flipping on its head, basically, which is a smart concept. But going back to previously, you saw what you learned there. What are you still using in today's day and age, and with the work you do today, from what you learned with Mercer's training, and which is with the measurement approaches, even things you've learned before that, but what are you still using today in your work with analytics?
So, I still use Google Analytics now, Google Analytics 4, as we know. I do a lot of work with Looker Studio. I mean, we could take a quick run through the e-commerce optimization hub and talk about that. Not as much with Tag Manager anymore. I mean, we've been, working on a couple clients together, working with a couple clients together. And, that's an area that's a tool, a platform that we used to use a lot more than we do now. And it's still relevant, but maybe not quite as much. Yeah, so in terms of measurement, but then also just using Google Sheets too, because that's the other piece. So one of the things that I have expanded upon in terms of the way that I work with clients is bringing in my my financial background, my finance background, to talk to them and to measure the effectiveness of marketing on their overall business from a global standpoint. So Mercer's teachings in a lot of respects were, how do you really understand the effectiveness of a given traffic source, as a for instance, just to use a very basic example. Whereas when we're looking at, and then looking at the attribution of, or measuring the effectiveness of a given traffic source through attribution tools and techniques and strategies. Whereas now I've really expanded my work in terms of looking at, how does the marketing that one is doing impact the bottom line of the business? And that's really a huge game changer. And it's something that I think you'd agree with this, Ryan, is that most agencies, most people in our roles just aren't looking at the numbers in that way. They're looking at numbers, but they're not looking and rolling everything up to look at the direct impact on the business's bottom line, real numbers in the bank account. And you said it, I loved it. And I wrote it down when you said it in the intro. You said, real revenue, not platform ROAS.
100%.
And that jumped out at me and hit me right between the eyes, because that is what it's all about. It's real revenue, not platform ROAS, because the platforms will tell you everything and anything to get you to put more money into the Zuckerberg vending machine.
They're high-fiving themselves, right? Yeah. Good job. Meta's patting itself on the back all the time. Same with Google. Google's worse. They're all doing the same thing, right? Yeah.
And that was one of those things that, when we go back to what Mercer taught us and what we learned from him, was that the platforms can say whatever they want, but unless you can kind of triangulate on what they're saying using Google Analytics or maybe, and some other tools, you really don't know. So
100%. Yeah.
But I do think that's the next level. It's bringing that real microscope into their business. It's from a finance standpoint to say, like, listen, this is what we're doing, or this is what we did, and this is the impact that it delivered to your bottom line. And you can't argue with that.
Spot on.
Doesn't matter what
the microscope is a great analogy for sure. And what stood out to me and what has stood out to me in working with you, even before working with you and in working with you over the years, definitely is the rigor, the financial background, and your rigor to the business metrics, not the marketing metrics.
Right.
More on that in a second. One thing that I think is very interesting, what you also said is, you can't just trust say you choose to trust Google ads in the platform or Meta ads in the platform, or a third-party attribution tool that says, hey, one dashboard for everything. I think that industry is a complete scam, by the way, but I like the analogy of, it's like going up to a crime scene and asking the first person you see, hey, what happened here? I'm a detective. Can you tell me what happened? And if you only ever ask that one person and you just say, well, that's what happened. Well, what if they were the killer?
Right.
It's like they could have been 5 blocks away and they're telling you what happened. How do you asking the right question to the right system? It's like trying to ask email, hey, what ad got the best click-through rate? That's not a question for your email system. Klaviyo shouldn't know, as an example.
Right.
So, and open rates for email wouldn't be something you would ever look at it. So, ask the right, so stop trying to have this whole one dashboard for everything and ask the right question to the right system, which is the job of a measurement marketer, of an actual. Right. So I love your background on the business metrics side of things. That's one of the things that really, when we work with clients together, that's not your role, like your job, but like you lead that because you are an expert in that area.
Right.
What are some, and maybe before we get into like the common metrics that, an e-commerce business should be tracking, we'll get there for sure. First question is like, do you see this businesses normally tracking these types of things? Are they tracking more in platform? Are they trying to use GA4? Are they using triple whale? Tell me what an average client is doing currently for this.
Honestly, I think an average client, the average person out there, which would probably, I'm just going to take a ballpark, 75% of the, more than average, because average might be, half the people out there. I would say at least 75% of the businesses out there that they really have no idea what's driving results, that they're just throwing a bunch of money at different things and kind of hoping and praying that things work.
The hope marketing, the fingers crossed. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And some people, I think that they generally speaking, I think that people might have, a couple things that they do well, but they're not doing everything that they could do. And so as a result, they're having a partial view of reality, and it's really hard to make educated, solid, grounded decisions when you just don't have all the data. You don't have all the information that you possibly could have. And I'm not saying you should just spend all your time looking at the data, but you should have a process through which you can identify how your marketing is working, And
Right.
so there's all sorts of different tools and techniques. And geez, we use new technology on a regular basis, and we try it out and we test it. Right. I mean, you're the king
Right.
of identifying new ways to measure. And it's kind of like a part-time job keeping up with that. So yes, we can look in terms of the individual platforms to measure and to see like how effective our things are. But you kind of have to take it on a certain level, with not a grain of salt, but you have to look at it through a certain like lens that you understand that what you're
Right.
seeing might not actually be 100% accurate.
Absolutely.
And we should say that accuracy, or the word accurate, per Mercer, going back to him, that's a
Yeah,
4-letter
trigger
word.
word. Yeah.
It's never going to be accurate. But things that are accurate is your bank account. So
Right.
measuring your bank account and key metrics, kind of like that come off of your financial statements,
Mhm.
that you can derive from them and from some of these other platforms, so that
Sure.
you can get this global view on overall marketing effectiveness. That's really the way that we proof test everything.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I see a trend happening as well, kind of answering my question a little bit in the similar vein of like, I see a trend as well where more marketing departments are shifting away from, of course, GA4. No one has really ever liked that, even though I kind of like some things about it. It can be useful when you don't try to
Oh
solve
yeah, yeah.
attribution with it.
Right,
Like, if you
right,
don't try
right,
to
right.
solve attribution and world hunger with GA4, it tends to work out pretty well. But
But
yeah,
it used to be pretty decent. If you,
universal analytics. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
universal analytics back before all the privacy and ad block, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And you could really do a lot of high level, deep,
Yeah. Oh,
thoughtful
absolutely.
analysis just using UTM parameters.
Yeah. There was no
UTM
consent
parameters.
cookie consent on a site, and everyone was captured all the time. Like
Yeah,
those were the days, but people didn't have so many devices, like all the
right,
things were more on our side as marketers for that
right.
like golden age of, I don't know, maybe a decade, if you will, but then,
Yeah,
yeah, it was inevitable that users should have the rights and
right.
privacy and more devices. Oftentimes we're seeing a lot more bots, obviously with AI and LLMs coming to websites and doing things for you. That's only going to increase. So
Right.
it gets more complex. So it's kind of one of the trends that I'm seeing. And absolutely moving away from the A word of accuracy. We want a useful truth. We don't want accuracy, but marketing teams moving away from marketing metrics only and getting into more business metrics, which I'm so happy about that. And it's not happening probably at the rate I think it should happen at, but it is
Yeah.
more of a trend in that direction. And that's one of the things that we try to do for whether they're a client or not, try to educate them on, hey, whether you work with us or not, like you should be doing this.
Right.
You should be making changes. Hopefully they're aggressive, hypothesis based. And then you can say, if you know your time lag, if your buying cycle is one day, then you could probably know pretty quickly if what you did is having a
Yeah.
material impact on the business. And I think this is where we interlude into some of those business metrics. And obviously we're, talking about e-commerce stores here. Is there, how do you go about establishing what they should be tracking for an average e-commerce business? There's probably some kind of non-negotiable things that they should be tracking, but how do you start that, I guess, in that process?
From a financial standpoint.
Yeah, just what they
Yeah.
should be looking at on a regular basis. Probably, is it weekly? Is that the cadence they should be looking at
Yeah,
most, generally speaking?
exactly. Like daily, I mean, of course, if there's a certain threshold, that daily might be applicable in terms of ad spend. But typically for like, I don't know, everybody that I'm working with, it's going to be
If
a
you're not
week.
spending six figures every day, you probably don't need to track it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
It's just, it would be, analysis paralysis. But certainly for 95% of businesses out there, once a week, reviewing your numbers. And specifically what I like to do, and if we just keep the conversation specific to say like an e-commerce brand, we can just talk about Shopify. and use that as an example because the bulk of our businesses
Yeah.
are that we're working with are e-com brands. So what I do is get access to Shopify and just keep in mind that when we're looking at the financial aspects, everything is highly accurate in these reports that we're doing.
Right.
So when we're saying, because I said I just don't want the listeners to think that when we say accuracy is impossible or it's a 4-letter word, we're talking about that specifically in
Marketing.
platform,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
Facebook platform or
Yeah.
Google Analytics. But when we're talking about financial results, we want that to be as accurate as humanly possible, right?
They have to ship the product. Hopefully they have the right information. Right. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Good clarification.
And what we're basically doing is we're looking at we start out and we run a report in Shopify that delivers a number of different metrics to us. And I'm just going to pull up this report in Shopify just so I can reference it in terms of the metrics that we're using to build this report. But we're going to start out with net sales on a weekly basis, and I'm going to get into the details on this too, if that's fine with you.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, we always will ask the client what day of the week would you like the week to end, just so that we're in sync with the way that they like to see their reporting.
Right.
Out of the box, Shopify ends the week on Sunday. We have a client that likes to see weekend of Saturday. So, that's an important thing just to keep that consistency so that this data can be rolled out through the company as needed to the right stakeholders. But let me just pull this up here so I can pull up the and I'm not going to share this internal report, but I call it net sales and orders over time. And it's basically made up of, so on a weekly basis, we're tracking net sales, orders first time. So new customers, that's a key one.
Right.
Cost of goods sold, number of total customers, average order value. And another piece is just making sure that when you're running these reports that the filters are correct in terms of sales channel. So if you happen to have a brick and mortar and an online component,
Right.
you'd want to eliminate, at least for our purposes here, when we're talking about, measuring the effectiveness of your overall marketing strategy, we're typically talking about online advertising. So in that case, I would just filter out that POS piece on the sales, the POS selection on the sales channel filter.
Which may sound like a small thing, but we're not going to name any names. One of our clients, their previous ad agency was running ads and counting sales for their in-store store. And we weren't pointing a finger saying like they were doing this on purpose. I just think it was negligence, and that's why it's so important, like it's
important
like,
to know
we're only spending this much money and getting this many sales. Like, why aren't you spending 100 times this? Like, this is amazing. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and the devil's in the details with these reports and with Shopify reporting. It's not easy some of it is counterintuitive. It's not, no platform's the best, but and Shopify is pretty darn good. But there are some nuance that you just have to be aware of. Otherwise, you could be making decisions based on flawed data or incomplete data.
Measure 3 times, cut once, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when we get that, what we can then, I'm just going to move this over here. What we can then do is, should I share my screen, by the way?
Yeah, it might be helpful visually to look.
So if we come in here and, all right. So here's the marketing contribution trackers. It's a Google sheet. This is just demo data. And we start out with, and this just shows you representatively, this would be every week. We see right here, week number 1, 2, 3, and we would assign a date to it. So we've got net sales. I'm just going to roll this over here.
Yep.
We've got net sales, and then we bring in
cost. You can zoom in maybe 2 or 3 clicks. That might be helpful just to, there we go. Perfect.
Is that good? Should I do it even more? Or?
One more maybe. If you command plus one more, there we go. Perfect. Yeah, well, that's good. I like it.
Perfect. So we've got net sales, and then we're going to bring in cost of goods sold. And the first metric that we're looking at is netting out net sales and cost of goods sold to create your CM1, your contribution margin 1, which is also, and I have these 2 definitions in this definition and the acronym in here because people think about it through using different names, right? So one could be CM1 or contribution margin one. Another one could be product margin. Either way, it's the same thing. It's basically your sales minus your cost of goods sold. This is what you have left over prior to every other expense in your business.
Love it.
So that then we look at it as a percentage of net sales. So in this case, it's 47% of net sales is going towards additional expenses and profit. Then we net out shipping. And typically what I like to do here is take an average shipping for, say, like the prior year, looking at what the shipping was, and then just dropping that in on a weekly basis, based on volume, obviously. And then at the end of every month, running an actual shipping report and then backfilling everything.
Got it. Makes sense.
But you're just not going to have that shipping data on a weekly basis. It would just
not
be
shipping out every week. Yeah.
Yeah.
When they buy it isn't when they ship it, right? Which is there's lag between.
Yeah, there's lag, and then there's just the pain in the neck of running a report too. You really just don't need to. And so then the next thing would be payment processing, and the way this is drilled down is that we basically, let me just roll this here. We basically take 2.85%, which is your typical Stripe fee, and we just apply it to net sales. So that's basically it's a formula right here. Then so this totals up our total value variable cost, which is cost of goods sold, shipping, and payment processing, and then we take that as a percent of net sales. And these percentages, these ratios, are really important to look at the trends and the patterns. So, for instance, here we had a cost of goods sold of 53, 50, 52, 55, 53, and then it starts dropping. Like, why is that? Why is that?
Sure.
Why was that higher? I mean, if you all of a sudden started seeing contribution margin dropping, you want to ask why. Or conversely, if you saw it going up a couple percent, 3-5%, you're going to want to ask a question, what's driving that? Because there might be an error in the back end. Who knows? I mean, there's all sorts of different scenarios that could be impacting that, and causing errors in your numbers. Because when there's errors in your numbers, if it's bad enough, you could be making bad decisions.
100%.
Then we take out direct marketing, and so this would be in this case, what the brand spent across Meta and Google Ads. Okay, for this demo. So that was $8,000 for that week.
That's just the ad spend, basically. That was the thing added there. Okay. At CM2. Got it.
Yeah. Yep. Or this would be for CM3. I'm sorry, I skipped over CM2. So CM2 is the contribution after variable costs. And then CM3 is the contribution after direct marketing. So you don't necessarily have to, these are things that the way that I use it is just to look at these percentages and just to make sure that, hey, if we're generating sales, net sales, are we keeping what we should be keeping?
Right. You could be generating a lot more sales, but a lot higher cost to acquire a new customer. And it just
there's all sorts of things.
Yeah. That's just one example of many. 100%. Yeah. And if someone's spending money, obviously, on an agency, on a growth partner, in their fee, should that be added in here as well at this CM3 level? Probably, because clearly you have a fee for them, not just the ad fee, right?
Yeah, I mean, I roll it in typically with clients because I think it makes sense.
Oh yeah, 100%. You should always. I'm always asking more. Where do you roll it in? Not should you? Because I would hope they do. Right? Yeah.
It's not in this. It's not in this demo because I didn't want to cloud it. But absolutely,
got it. Yeah.
That's
CM3 probably.
Yeah, because that can that fee can differ based on what we're doing for them and all that stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
But anything that is related to direct marketing, that is this is my opinion, anything that's related to managing and executing direct marketing through Facebook, Google Ads, TikTok, those fees should be included in that direct marketing cost, because the other option is that you do nothing, right? Or that you do it internally and that still costs you money. So I just like to put it in, and it makes it more transparent, I guess. And
you're getting a true. Yeah, exactly. True cost to acquire a customer, true contribution margin. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then, but notice that before we even get into any of these metrics, that's where we stop reporting. So we stop at this point. This $39,000 is essentially what in this example, so this would be 110 minus cost of goods sold, minus all the variable costs, minus the direct marketing. You're left with, in this example, 39 grand left over to pay for overhead, to pay for property, plant and equipment, labor, all those things, as well as the profit that's generated as a result of these sales. But that we don't
Most
have.
marketers haven't done any of that. So that's why I'm glad we spent more time on all that, because usually they go into some of the other metrics we're going to get into. But this also, if you're using third-party tools and these push button, simple Wicked reports, Triple Well, High ROAS, Northbeam, all these you don't need to use. We can grow businesses to hundreds of millions of dollars using a spreadsheet, and you can too. And they're not going to show you a lot of the things that we just showed you here. And that's like the fundamentals, like 101. Like you can't run to MER, you can't run to all the other things that Scott's going to get into without knowing these fundamentals, like just unit economics, like at the start. So I'm really glad you spent more time talking about that, because I think that's going to be new information to a lot of marketers. Hold on, Scott, I think it's on your end. Can you hear me okay? I can't hear you, and I think it's on your end.
You know what? I hit I must have, when I moved my mic, I hit my mute button. So
Okay.
where was I?
The
Sorry.
last thing I said, or I didn't hear your response, is I basically said, like, I think a lot of marketers haven't seen what we just showed. I'm glad you spent more time on that,
Yeah, I
because you're going to get into MER and all these things. They've seen those probably to some level. I don't think they've seen a lot of the things that we just talked about, because a lot of tools aren't showing that either.
yeah, and I think the best part about this strategy methodology is the simplicity. It's just simple. And like
Yeah.
those platforms that you just brought up, they're complex. There's a big learning curve, and I'm sorry, but most e-commerce brand owners and marketers have like a massive amount of things on their plate, and learning another platform just usually takes the back seat for a lot of things. And never mind the level of usefulness on many of those tools, the level of accuracy of information or usefulness of information.
Right.
We like to do things that are easy to interpret from the client standpoint, so they can clearly see, yes, this is positively impacting my business, or no, it's not. And it gives
Yeah.
them a platform to measure their advertising with, or their marketing, the effective.
Simple scales, complex doesn't. And
Yeah.
I think the tools, some of those tools will advertise, oh, you plug it in, you're up and running in under 10 minutes. And that is true. But again, it's their interpretation of your data. They're making professional guesses at what they think is reality. And we don't play games we can't solve. We're not trying to solve attribution. We're trying to say what is contributing to incremental top line revenue that wouldn't have happened anyway. That's how businesses grow, not how you grow Meta's business, which is like our saying.
And it's how your bank account grows too, most specifically, not what Meta says how your business is doing, right? I mean,
we've all seen this looks amazing in platform, probably more in Google's and then Meta's end, but both say this is looking great. You should, the little messages in Google, if you just increase it by 20 more percent, you could have 800% more conversion. There's something, we've all seen amazing in platform ROAS and flat to down to maybe a little bit up, but like 2%, like 80% increase in platform, 2% increase or flat in your bank account. Like that's very common. And if you're experiencing any of that, we hear you, we empathize with you, and we've helped plenty of people like you, because that's the performance mirage. That's what we're talking about here. That's the reality of that. But there's some other metrics too that nCAC being probably, if I had to choose one, that's like, hey, Ryan, you can only measure one thing. Like I would probably choose nCAC, even though that's a little bit frightening to only choose one. But like, that's being more of the performance marketer and the media buyer, that's something that I will look at way before I even think about looking at, ROAS or anything like that. I will want to know, most e-commerce businesses, they have a high repeat order rate. Our goal with ad spend isn't to drive more repeat, it's to drive more new.
Right. Yeah. It's a hard choice, but I think nCAC, yeah, that it's nCAC and it's number of new customers as a just from a growth standpoint. It's all about new customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that being said, these are the metrics that and let me just talk about how we populate the sheet first so that there's some context around where these numbers are coming from. So basically what I do is I hyperlink this report so it's quick and easy to do on a weekly basis. And then I just manually drop these numbers in. So I do this for all of our clients every single Monday morning, and then I shoot a Loom video overviewing or just quickly recapping the prior week in terms of results. But the first thing is, click out to this report, it brings you to Shopify, and then you just drop in these net values: net sales, cost of goods sold, orders, customers, new customers. And then this automatically breaks out your returning customers. It calculates it just by changing it with this equation.
Nice.
There's percentage change from the prior period for each one of these metrics, so that again you can look at the trends and the patterns. Standard data analysis. As Mercer says, that going back to him again, the truth is in the trend, the power is in the pattern. That's very true. And the discrete, unique numbers don't matter nearly as much as the trends and the patterns.
Absolutely. Yeah. You could even remove these numbers and just look at the percent changes.
That's right.
That could be pretty useful to a degree, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing that we just calculate the all orders AOV and then bringing in the new customer AOV as well. That's from a separate Shopify report that's specific to AOV and new customers. So that's where the Shopify data comes from. And then, if they're using Recharge or AppStore or one of those subscription services, we break that out in terms of subscription sales, orders, and customers. So we can look and see how that aspect of the business is trending. Subscriptions are obviously adds value to a company for that monthly recurring revenue. It stabilizes the business from a revenue standpoint. There's obviously a lot of benefits with subscriptions. We all know that because we all have probably too many subscriptions than we need right now.
Right.
But the other thing is then we look at email and we'll look at GA4 orders and GA4 revenue. And then we also look at Klaviyo revenue or whatever email platform. Most e-commerce brands are on Klaviyo, so that's where it's listed here. But we do this just to look through. This is a good example actually of looking through at different touch points to identify where reality is. So this is obviously off quite a bit. GA4 revenue, this is all last click, so at least would be the assumption for this example. But there's going to be a disparity. How far apart are they? In this situation, and this is actually a good operating without a net, this has a really high difference. So we would want to look and see what's driving that. It's almost too much of a difference.
Right.
And so that's a whole nother episode, but we record the email just to have some guidance on how email is working on a high level.
Exactly.
Even though there's
and in this case, we weren't getting involved necessarily with in this scenario, like the implementation of GA4. And even if it is wrong, one of them is wrong, clearly more wrong than the other one. It's still about how did it change over. If the implementation didn't change, this is still highly useful information because we can compare it to last week and the week before and year over year, et cetera. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And then SMS, same thing if you have SMS and typically all this is coming through with UTM parameters between email and SMS. So then the other one would be Meta. And there we're looking at the spend for the for the 7-day window. And here we come into tracking, and which we'll talk about probably in a different episode unless you want to touch on it now, but we definitely are going to be looking within platform at new customers and returning customer counts. And then we look at total customers, and out of that, we're also taking the platform nCAC, new customer acquisition cost. So, I think it probably makes sense not to get into the weeds on new customers and returning customers, but that is a huge, incredibly important piece to your
Mm.
comment earlier about if you had if you had one
Right.
metric, what would it be? It would be nCAC because of that
100%.
focus on new customers.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say it's the short of it, the like executive overview of like the since I handle kind of more the media buying conversion tracking setup is it is two things. One, it's useful to know our goal is new customers, and are you driving more new customers from like a reporting standpoint? What's way more important is, are you feeding the algorithm the right data, knowing that this was, in our case, how we do things is first click new customer CAPI based imports, because we want it to go cold. We want in platform to look like shit so that we can make the business look great. And we
right.
don't live and die by, oh my God, Meta's not doing great. That means it's cold and we're doing what we want it to do. So make sure you have network tagging set up. Otherwise, you're wasting money, period. We'll go
Yeah.
into that in a different episode, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a couple episodes. We could talk about that like every week due to the level of importance.
And the
Um,
fact that no one's basically doing it, it
and
seems
the
like
fact
so.
that
Yeah.
and it feeds
Yeah.
the algorithms with exactly what we want it to do. I mean, that's the whole point. So we do the same thing with Google as well, with Google Ads, spend, NC, and RC. So we're recording those to see how each one of those platforms, to identify and to understand the types of customers that each platform is delivering to us, new customers or returning customers, because there's a big difference between the two.
Right.
Um, yeah, and so then down here we talked about this, the payment processing. Within the spreadsheet, you will notice that there are different colors being used. So anything that's in this green are cells that require an input. If it has, like as a for instance, this one right here, it's an auto equation, and it just
Mm,
calculates it.
that's a help.
Key metrics are in red. So there's only after the CM2, 1, 2, and 3, there's 4 metrics that we really focus on to make sure, and these are the guardrail metrics. Are we operating within these? Before I get into that, I just want to make sure that I mention that we do have this new customer acquisition cost max calculated, and then we have this buffer. So I'll talk about that, but this is a dynamic variable that we can use in one of the formulas for this right here, this max nCAC with buffer. So we're going to get into that.
Sure.
And I actually have a note right here. So in any event, the first, after we get down, we've determined that in this case, there was $39,000 generated in last week in whatever the week was. The first metric that we look at, and this, I don't have this in red because and I don't have CAC in red because yes, they're important, but if we really want to make this simple and we want to
Yeah.
make it like, just come in here and look at these 4 metrics primarily, these marketing metrics.
Yeah.
These are the ones that you focus on. So let's just talk about MER first of all.
And the name of the spreadsheet is marketing right? So it's that, which is what I love, right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's a great call out. It's the marketing contribution tracker. So the whole purpose of the spreadsheet and this system is to identify what marketing is contributing to the bottom line. So when you put in $1, what are you getting back? Now, when we're talking about ROAS, that's an in-platform metric. Similar,
Right.
ROAS is you put $1 in and you get money back out, and that's the ratio. MER, media efficiency ratio, or sometimes synonymously referred to as marketing efficiency ratio, is your entire business. So it's basically, you put in $1, what are you getting back? And we can look at the formula, because I always, again, just let's talk about how this is calculated. It is K2, which is net sales divided by your direct marketing costs. That's it. So it's total sales, not just Facebook sales, not just Google sales, your total sales divided by your direct marketing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so in this example, every dollar that we put in, we're getting just under $14 back. That's a pretty good return,
Yeah. Let's do more of what works, Scott.
let's do more.
Yeah.
And this is obviously just, demo numbers, but
Right.
But they are reasonable, and they're kind of like based off of a given scenario. So that's the first thing. And as simple as that. Do you need to go into that anymore?
No, totally makes sense. Couldn't be more simple, but it couldn't be more important. And I like how the spreadsheet, since I check this weekly after you update this and look at this quite a bit, is I like how I also one of my takeaways with the spreadsheet is the more important metrics are at the top or the metrics you have at the top are there for a reason. You should look at this top down,
Yes.
because it's like it doesn't even get an attribution until the bottom. And that shows its importance. It's not as important. It's business metrics first.
Yep.
As you keep scrolling, you'll get into Google, you'll get into Meta. And yeah, it's important to know
Right.
that, but it's noisy, So like
It is noisy. Yeah.
that's where I like these. Yeah.
And and whenever you go into one of these, into any type of a spreadsheet data source, you should always go in with the mindset of, what questions do I want to answer when I go in? You should never go into any type of spreadsheet just kind of like pondering around, like hopping around from place to place. And so
Love it.
what we've done here with the red highlights is just saying, like, just focus on this. And certainly if you were doing one of these for yourself, you would have to fill in all this stuff, but it all rolls up into these metrics. So the next one after MER is nMER, which is the N is a prefix, that small n prefix, which essentially stands for new customer. So it's new MER, new customer MER. Could be
And we'll see that elsewhere. So good to clarify it. Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever you see that small n before, it's just signifying that it's a new customer oriented metric. And that's really important because, as you can see, nMER in this case is less than half, but still strong. For every dollar that you put in, that we're putting in, we're getting back $6 in new customer revenue. So how do we calculate this? We're using information down here, the stuff that's in Shopify, to calculate that. So, look at the formula. We're taking the number of new customers, multiply it times the new customer AOV. And this is where it's really important to look at the different breakouts of AOV. It's not what I see so many times that people will just say, oh, my AOV is in this case 80. Okay, yeah, that's correct.
All customers, right?
That's all customers. That's all. Yeah, all orders, all customers that completed a transaction was 80. But for new customers, it's 65. And that's a key number. That gap of 15 can make a big difference in terms of determining your scaling thresholds. In terms of
23% difference. That's huge. Yeah.
It's huge. If you were making decisions, and this is a great example, again, operating without a net here, just kind of talking through it, is if you were making decisions based on an 80 AOV, and you're trying to scale new customers, you're just operating with incorrect information. So you're making flawed decisions, essentially,
Right.
that could,
Right.
lead to bad things, depending on the disparity between the two. But that being said, it's nMER, it's number of new customers times the new customer AOV, multiply those two together, take the product and divide it through by the direct marketing cost. So you're singling out that new customer revenue essentially, and you're dividing it through by your direct marketing cost. Why do we do that? Because most of the direct marketing is focused on new customer acquisition. Not all of it, but a lot of it is, and that's our primary goal. So it only stands to reason to say, out of all of our marketing, because we always like to operate from a conservative standpoint.
Sure.
Let me back up by saying, of this 8,000, you could theoretically say, well, you know what? Only 75% of that 8,000 or $6,000 was earmarked for new customer acquisition, and the 2,000 was really exclusively focused on returning customer campaigns or returning customer type, strategies.
Right.
We say, you know what, let's be conservative, roll it all up, because at the end of the day, we don't know exactly where all of these marketing dollars are going. I mean, we assume that they're being distributed accordingly, but it just makes more sense to roll it all up and say, hey, our main objective is new customers. Let's take all that direct marketing cost in order to arrive at a very conservative new customer MER. number, which would
Totally.
be for every dollar that we put in, we're getting 6 back. Very strong. I mean, if this was
Absolutely.
down to 2, it would get a little bit more, sketchy.
Right.
Then the next one would be CAC, very common metric that people refer to. It's an acronym for customer acquisition cost. So let's take a look and see how this is calculated. It's direct marketing divided by the number of orders. So it's saying we spent all of this money, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is globally for all of our customers, not just new customers, but every customer out there. We're spending, in this case, it was $8,000, $8,011, and we're dividing that through by the total numbers of orders, 1383. And so we come out with $5.8 as our CAC.
Right.
And so this is not in red. It's more of a
Nice to know metric.
yeah, it's a benchmark. It's like, okay, our CAC is 5.8. Now, but what's the real, that's a nice to know number, not entirely hugely valuable because returning customers are obviously a large part of that.
Right.
And I don't know why we would really be measuring like the cost of a returning customer as well. You probably want to scratch that out of that, but
No, I see so many people. I posted about this on LinkedIn yesterday, actually. I see so many people just, and even like, not just people on LinkedIn I'll comment on. I see also people like Alex Ramosi, people that are great business minds, and they don't clarify what they mean by CAC. And
yeah,
99% of all businesses should be clarifying nCAC, not just CAC. Like he'll just say like, what's your cost to acquire a customer? And most business models have some level of either recurring or reoccurring, and therefore you really mean what's your cost to acquire a new customer, because also you shouldn't be spending more than 10% of your budget on repeat customers that have already purchased from you from like a media buying standpoint, from like your time. And anyway, like most people just say CAC, but they should clarify, if you're a marketer, that's nCAC. That should be nCAC. It shouldn't just be CAC.
right.
Like
But
email's a great channel for CAC. Like, or your product being great, just they'll come back on their own. There's other things to, think about.
and what if you were to put a number, a percentage on the number if we were to look at 100 brands, when they say CAC, are they referring to CAC as I just defined it, or nCAC? What would you say?
Probably CAC, probably just
Yeah.
because they're probably using a tool, and the tool doesn't get into the weeds and separate that out because it's just easier. And it's going to look better because they want them to be like, oh, I want to pat myself on the back. I want them to feel good. Therefore, of course, they're going to measure CAC because it's always going to be lower. CAC is more important, and like MER is more important around Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Like those are times when you should harvest your crops. But for 99% of the year, 95% of the year, you should be focused on new customers, because that's what's going to fuel business growth, which is what you laid out and why it's in red. And CAC is in red.
That's what exactly. And if I'm gonna share here again. Yeah, and I think that's that's probably a good example of just we're doing it this certain way and most people aren't. And so yeah, we keep CAC up here, but nCAC is the most important. You said at the beginning, if we could have any one metric, this would be it, because this shows you the cost of acquiring a customer. And that is, if you're trying to grow your business, or even if you're even just say, I just want to stay stable. I don't care. I'm making $1 million a year and I just want to keep everything copacetic and not rock the boat. If you're not acquiring new customers, right, what's going to happen? Everybody knows your business is going to go down because there's attrition. People die, they move away, they, go to a competitor. There's a host of reasons why people won't be there for the long term and why your customer base will shrink. So the understanding the exact nCAC number is key, because then you can make decisions, media buying decisions, in terms of how much you're willing to pay for a customer.
100%.
And so that is this nCAC, this break-even nCAC number. This is the maximum in this example that this business should pay to acquire a new customer. And that's if they just want to break even. If they have a strategy where they're willing to go in the red a little bit because they're going to get more over time, that's okay.
Right.
And that's certainly a very valid strategy for many businesses. in that case, we would want to drop that in here. But for most people, I would say, yeah, a very high percentage are not going to be okay with, losing money on that first order. That
100%.
they want to have that liquidity
Yeah.
built in. So the way that we figure this out in terms of break even nCAC, because really what we're trying to say here is, all right, this is where this 10.7 in K10, I'm just going to bring it in closer a little bit here. This 10.7 is what we're paying to acquire a customer, and we will make money on every single customer, on every average order for a new customer up to $27.80, because at that point, that's when we start going into the negative. Okay. And so
Right.
let's look and see how this is calculated. It's taking new customers times the new customer AOV. That's what we just did in the nCAC model. But then we multiply it times the contribution after variable costs. So this is showing us essentially how much is left over after our variable costs, but before direct marketing. And then we multiply that product times the number of new customers. So it's
Yep.
basically saying, all right, if we look at all of our new customers, what was the revenue that we generated off of this after expenses, but before direct marketing? And that number is, in this case, 27.8. So that delta, that $17.1, $17.10 is our runway that we have in terms of spend before we start going negative on new customer acquisition.
Love that.
Any questions on that at all, Ryan? Or
No, I think it's something that most businesses also don't do, is setting a ceiling on your nCAC. Again, if they do set a ceiling, it's what is the most you're willing to pay for a customer. Again, they're vague. They don't say new customer, which is what
Right.
needs to be established.
Right.
And I mean, media buying and performance marketing is still the most effective way to acquire customers. Like it hasn't changed, and Meta's getting so much better. But if you don't know your ceiling on your nCAC, you're just going to spend until what? You don't
Right.
know. You don't know the guardrails.
And you know what that leads to, when you don't have that information, that knowledge that's at your fingertips whenever you want it. There's an inherent, a lack of confidence builds inside people. I hear it, and
Exactly.
you hear it all the time. I just want to have the confidence that I can make better decisions. I want to have the confidence that what I'm doing is translating to the bottom line. I want to have the confidence that I'm not going to wake up one day and everything's going to be like, I'm going to just be surprised at what's actually happening in my business. This exposes all of that and just says, it dumbs it down, it simplifies it, it makes it easy to understand. And it's like, all right, nMER's going well, nCAC, that's solid. We got plenty of room here. It's trending. It's actually, in this case, we're looking at it. It's kind of, we're here at $16 for a new customer. Now we've got it down to 10.7. It's been trading in this range. Like that's really the way that you're looking at it. And it also, if this starts creeping up, what do? We say, what's causing that? We develop hypotheses around what might be happening. And then we go in and try to investigate the causes for that so that we can rectify it and improve. But all of those decisions, all of those actions are coming from a simple looking at this sheet and saying, everything's good or we need to pay attention more to it. And
100%. And we don't have this shown in this spreadsheet here. We obviously have like many, many more like sheet tabs inside of a regular client spreadsheet. This is for, as you're seeing, demonstrative purposes only, but we also have an annotations tab, because it's one of the key things. Just like when people say CAC and they really should be saying nCAC, people we found don't use annotations either at all or nearly enough. They don't have a system for their annotations, so they know, yes, you could of course go into Meta, look at history, go into Google Ads, but that gets to be really complicated. And then also there's people that just made changes on the website that were pretty big and didn't, you would have no idea what they did. And so you have to have an annotation system so that when there is a big change, like the CAC is, going up rapidly, like, well, what did we do? At the date you made the change, who made the change? What did they do? What was the hypothesis, et cetera, et cetera.
The process is equally as important as the analysis, like that follow-up. I mean, it's
Love that.
symbiotic, right? You can't have one without the other. Or if you're trying to optimize without these numbers, you're just kind of like random acts of marketing. So why don't we hop into the final metric here, which is the max nCAC with a buffer, because we're very, I think, just by nature risk averse when we're working with our clients. We want to be as conservative as we possibly can, but more importantly, we want to be conservative to the level that they want to be. So this is an absolute number, this break-even nCAC. It's like, this is the max, right? This is the max that you can pay before you start losing money. But a business owner, marketer who's responsible for delivering results might want to operate a little bit more conservatively just to account for the unknown. As much as accurate as we're trying to be in here, things like cost of goods sold could be off and you're making decisions incorrectly, or with flawed data. Things like, I mean, shipping and payment processing isn't going to move the needle nearly as much, but certainly cost of goods sold is a big one. That if that number is off, or there's been some variability with tariffs, for instance, with product costs. I mean, all these things are, just inflation in general, the economic woes of today are causing, variance in this area. So how do we hedge against that, and how do we build that into this financial model? Is we have a max nCAC with a buffer. So we basically taking this number right here, this break-even nCAC, and then we're reducing it by a percentage that is right here. So,
and this is a conversation that we would want to have with the client. Say, what is your level of comfortability, or whatever the right word is there? But right.
And then we operate from that. So on a regular basis, in this case, we'd say like, okay, we're at 10.7 nCAC, break even's just under 28. The max nCAC's 25. So we've got, like worst case, we've got $14.30 in terms of new customer acquisition cost to as a buffer, that we can play with, that we can use that to scale and maybe take some risk in terms of creative or strategies, and say like, we've got all this room to operate in. How about if we try this new strategy? Because the hypothesis would be, if we're doing some type of a test, that we were going to reduce our nCAC. But let's just say it might be kind of an aggressive approach. When we're looking at this, we feel comfortable with it because we know we can calculate our exposure on a given experiment. And do it with the highest level of confidence that this is our max exposure on it, and it's not going to measurably hurt the business.
We've got room to play, and additionally room with this. If you change that, what is it, 10% right now? If you change that to like 20 or whatever, like that would then change. Like it's dynamically built, right? So 20. Now let's see what we have to play with at that column here.
Yeah, it goes down to 22.
There you go. Just like that. It's built in. Yeah, love it.
Went down by $2.78.
Yeah.
So
you're 100% right when you say the confidence is here, and you're removing uncertainty from the decision-making process for whomever, all of the people using this system, which really, I mean, who would you say is this spreadsheet for, Scott? Is it for business owners, marketers, is it kind of a collection of people?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. It's definitely applicable for business owners, and it's definitely applicable for marketers. I don't think it's I think maybe on a high level, not getting into, obviously it depends on somebody's comfort with sharing internal financial results with employees, but for key employees, I definitely think that nCAC, break-even nCAC, the nMER, these metrics right here are things that they should have access to. Certainly the contribution after direct marketing, that's more internal. This is more geared towards senior level executive, founder, CMO.
Exactly.
But when we get into these metrics, this is helpful because then the marketer or business owner can have conversations with people down the line to say, like, these are the metrics that we're managing to. And if you're doing content, and we are, let's say there's somebody in the business who's generating content for organic sharing, right? you can measure the effectiveness of that through this type of a spreadsheet due to the fact that it's global in nature. So,
Great point. Yeah.
there's all sorts of different ways that that you can that you can use these metrics. But I definitely think it's helpful for the right roles to share these metrics and just to keep them up to date on where they're at, because
100% right. Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with it depends on who, what level of comfortability. Obviously, there's some financial data in there. So, what the easy part is, because we've done this with certain clients before, is you obviously have one spreadsheet for the founders, the execs, the C levels kind of people, executives, managers, directors that, yeah, share everything with them. That's the mentality there usually. But then another spreadsheet, you could just like import range and only import the rows you
right,
want. Let's have them see just the marketing metrics and things like that. Or not everyone's a spreadsheet person like, Scott and I are. And sometimes people need a visual to be able to better interpret the data. That's not really us anymore, but it's pretty easy to also hook this up to a Looker Studio. We generally do some formula manipulation so that Looker Studio has it in the right way to look at this so that it's easy to just put a visual on all the existing data that's already there. We don't really do that for ourselves, but some of our clients want to look at that visually. And yeah, we're already doing the work, adding the metrics there weekly. And in the important part, if you want to look at this in a little bit, if you want to put a chart in Sheets, if you want to look in Looker Studio, it's all there for you, if you want to look at that. So I love what you've shared today on the process, the mentality, the numbers themselves, and walking us through even kind of how you got to those, because I even took a few notes. There's so many that are, going back to the CAC statement, just overall CAC, or how you got to some of those numbers. The devil is absolutely in the details. I mean, measure 6 times, cut once, maybe should be the
right,
analogy, because
right.
once you have your metrics established and your formulas established in that sheet, going back to my comment, like you can grow a business to hundreds of millions or billions of dollars with a spreadsheet.
Right.
You don't need fancy dashboards, because the thing that I like most about this is that it frees up your time. I'm not saying dashboards are a waste of time, but I've found that people don't use them as much as I wanted them to.
Yeah.
And this probably, now probably takes you 10 minutes a week to populate a lot of this.
Yeah.
And you're in and out, and you can go focus on hypotheses that will move the business in the right direction, right? The actual activities.
Yeah. And it's just going through the process. I think that there's a lot of value in terms of going through this process of populating the sheet or being involved with it in some way, like
Right.
reviewing the numbers every single week. And yeah, I mean, I think there's value in populating it yourself, but
I totally agree with that, because we can, use an app script, use Claude. It's not about, we haven't automated this because we haven't been able to. I wanted to pause for you there,
yeah,
because if there's so much value, because your brain thinks when you're entering the numbers, right? So
yeah,
that's what I like about it, because I've done it before. You're on vacation, I populate this, and I think about, that's what we expected to happen. So great. Or that isn't what we expect, but it's that forced critical thinking is what I like about it.
yeah, it is.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
And you just get it. I agree with you 100%. I mean, some things you shouldn't do manually because it just doesn't make sense unless you enjoy it. Like I enjoy cutting the grass. I'm never going to pay somebody to cut the grass because I like to do it, right?
yep.
Is it good use
That's
of my
your
time?
commute time.
No.
Work from home. It's your commute.
Yeah,
You can listen to a podcast. Yeah,
right.
great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like, but this is one of those things that, that even though it takes time and even though it might not necessarily be the best use of your time just from the cutting and pasting and it is the best. I would make the argument that it is the best use of your time because it forces you, if you put it on your calendar, like for instance, for our clients, I have a ClickUp task that fires off every Monday morning for each one of them. And it just goes down through and I have to click the task off no matter what. So
if you don't have it on your calendar, if you don't, people say, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." They don't. Like we're proof of that. Like we just, like it's, yeah.
Yeah, you have to have it in there. And going through that process, like you said, it's 10 minutes. It take you longer at the beginning. I've, obviously been doing this for a long time, so it doesn't take as long. But even if it took you 20 minutes, it's not going to take you much more than that. to
Hmm.
populate these numbers in. Um, at that stage of the game, you just can look at it and have the confidence or know what you should do next. And you're doing it on a weekly basis, which is a completely reasonable cadence. And you're staying on top of the business. If you all of a sudden see like that your new customer count is going down, Meta's not going to tell you that.
Right.
Google Ads is not going to tell you that. You have to go in there and actually look. And so having that in place, and we had an issue with tracking. Remember that a couple months ago in one of our clients?
Right. We noticed it immediately.
I noticed it Monday morning. The
Yeah.
new customer counts
Yeah.
were like
We
way
didn't
up.
drop
And we're like,
spend. What happened? Like,
what's going on?
yep. Yeah.
How
It,
did
it
this
acts as
happen?
like an alert system, basically, without even like trying to. You'll
Right.
know, like you'll be on top of it. And
Yeah. And
something that's useful too is like oftentimes you could see things, you do this well because you also have a monthly tracker because like between week to week, you don't really see more than a 10% swing oftentimes. But obviously if you
right.
take a step back and do the monthly,
Right.
that you're going to see more of those swings and those percent changes. And then you get into the year over year comparison, a little more useful
Yeah.
depending on the business. Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about that. I mean, it's very relevant for this, which is the next, and I alluded to that a little bit when I was talking about the shipping, about rolling that up at the end of the month. But that's the other thing is that on a monthly basis, go in right after the month is over and populate, do the exact same exercise with those reports, just using different date ranges. And I do recommend not like cutting and or creating a formula within these things, but actually going into the platform
Right.
and seeing what that report says and making sure that it's kind of close. And there's always going to be some variability, especially with Shopify, because
Sure.
there's reconciliation that happens, so those numbers are going to be off. But doing it monthly will show you, number one, the month to date results from the prior month. But then what we also do is we look at the prior year, that month for the
Right.
prior year. So we're looking at month to month growth. We can look at quarter to quarter growth with that. But primarily, honestly, it's month to month, and then it's year over year is what we're looking at.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah.
making
It's not
sure
always not all businesses have the same level of seasonality, but clearly some it could be just like night and day difference between previous month. It's like that was Christmas and you're a gifting company. Therefore, like
Right.
that's gonna matter a lot. So be aware of that. And when in doubt, compare year over year, but do both, of course. It's important to know the trends and patterns of both.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I'm trying to think. I think that's pretty much, that I think that gives a good overview of the contribution tracker.
Are we gonna give away this spreadsheet, Scott? Can they click
Sure.
below and they make a copy, that do the whole make a copy thing in Sheets themselves?
Yeah. Let me
Awesome.
let me just point out one other thing on that, since we're going to talk about that too. That's what I was anticipating. So if I share one more time here. Okay, so we've got the other thing on this is, and I'll build it out so that there is a monthly one in here as well.
Cool.
And then these are the key metrics definitions. So basically for any of these,
Love
like
it.
net sales, cost of goods sold, I mean, all of these line items, I have a definition. If there's an acronym like MER, we've got the detail, and then we've got the formula, and then there's actually a link to a blog post explainer, which goes into,
Yeah.
which goes into more detail. And then we have this, the formulas with some in plain English, like what actions would you take? So what we were just saying,
That.
nCAC goes above, same deal. So
Love this. Got to have a data dictionary for sure, and that's a good way to make sure you're not making any assumptions and you are clear on
Right.
what it means, what it is, why it matters, all the above for sure. Well,
Yeah.
Scott, where can people connect with you and learn more about what you do?
So my website is ecommerceoptimizers.com, and my email is scott@ecommerceoptimizers.com, and there's a place to book a call and all that stuff. So pretty
Awesome.
straightforward. I think everybody knows the drill at this stage of the game, right?
Scott, it has been a pleasure, obviously, working with you and having you as guest number 1 on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It was an honor and a pleasure. And that was a great episode. It's always good to talk about this stuff. We geek out on this way too much.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's just another conversation, right? Another
That's right.
day, basically.
Thanks, man.
Alrighty.